As I see it, there are two main paths that we can take in our life journeys. And one of those paths involves what I would call pattern. It's living life unconsciously, living life according to the natural patterns that we have in our minds and bodies. And the other path is what I call the path of self-mastery. And I want to talk about this using sexuality as an example. I teach and I lead men, especially along this path of self-mastery. And one area I really enjoy working with men around is this area of sexuality. Because in no area is it more pronounced for a lot of men than in sexuality, this difference between what I would call the path of self-mastery versus the path of pattern, the path of addiction, the path of what actually can be damaging to us and other people. So let's go into that. So let's talk first about this path of what I would call pattern. When I talk about pattern, what I mean is that we are unconscious. We're not making choices based on something that is clear to us or something that we're trying to come into in our lives. We're making choices based on something we've learned in the past. We're making choices out of habit. And these habits may be leading us to good things, and it may not be. Some people, their natural habits do actually lead to things that are productive for them. Usually they grew up with parents and in families where their parents were really good at helping them learn skills and learn things naturally that could help them achieve their aims. For a lot of people, where they get stuck is around patterns that have to do with pain, that have to do with wounding and trauma. And whatever the wounding is, we all have patterns, we all have issues, we all have stuff that gets us stuck. And if it doesn't interfere with us functioning, at least what it's going to do is interfere with us actualizing, reaching our potential. So pattern is usually something where we're not thinking much about it and we're not present. We're just allowing ourselves to go into what I would call a hypnotic state. There are lots of different types of hypnotic states. Some are good and some are not so good. But hypnotic states where we're just letting our brain run us. We wake up in the morning and, for instance, we start to feel turned on. So we get the computer out and we masturbate to porn. That can be a pattern. And a lot of these patterns are things that soothe us or make us feel better. And these patterns can be unhealthy because they get us caught in ruts. For instance, around sexuality, in this case, I get caught in a rut where I get turned on, and it's so powerful what porn has to offer in terms of training the mind and training our chemical system. There's so much stimulation in it. There's so much novelty in it. Porn, for instance, is a great example of something that takes what would be a natural impulse and it changes it into something that can be really unhealthy. It's unhealthy because it's not part of real life. It doesn't set our brain up for success when it comes to being with an actual partner. And also, it's like a drug. It's not that much different than a drug, especially when a man is frequently ejaculating. They're actually just tripping that dopamine system over and over and over again around particular stimuli that are ultra stimulating and very novel, very different than real life. And so the brain actually gets trained over time to learn, oh, this is what sex is. This is what turns me on. This is what it means to have an orgasm. This is what it means to have enjoyment. This is what it means to love even. So it's partly about what we might learn from it, but it's based on a pattern that starts with the need to soothe ourselves. Usually, porn, for instance, is something that we use to soothe. It isn't necessarily something that's just about enjoyment, especially once it gets ingrained and becomes an addiction. It's a habit, a pattern that we feel like we can't control, like we need to do it because it's so stimulating, because we're so used to that dopamine fix. So that's an example of how we might have a habit or pattern that comes from wounding, like I need to soothe myself. I don't feel good about myself, for instance. I feel bored. I don't really have purpose. I don't know where I'm going with my life. So I just get caught in habits and patterns of stimulation, of excitement, of soothing in order to soothe myself around the challenges that I'm having in my life, especially challenges with purpose, especially challenges with motivation. I use porn specifically here because I think this is a great example of habits and patterns that are destructive because they limit. It's like, imagine that habits and patterns are like a road, and patterns are sort of like pathways, and you can have lots of different pathways. But once you get addicted or caught in certain habits and patterns, it's like you have only one road. You start to just go down this one road over and over and over again, and it always leads to the same place. It usually leads to our pain, our wounding, because it's connected with that ultimately. And if we're not aware of the pain and wounding and deciding to do something about it, what we end up doing is we just reinforce the wounding by scratching that itch. It's like scratching an itch or picking a scab over and over and over again. We're touching on the wound with this habitual behavior that's meant to soothe it. We don't quite heal the wound because we never quite see it, and we just reinforce the habitual pattern, the coping pattern around that particular thing. So habits and patterns that are based on wounding will get us caught in the same loops over and over again. And so what this does is it preoccupies us. So now we're not on the other path. We're actually actualizing. We're actually figuring out who we are. We're actually doing healthy things that can lead to more possibilities. We're getting caught in ruts that get us more and more limited, more and more myopic, small, fewer and fewer options. So this is what consciousness does. It allows us to move into the path where we're actually able to create more options for ourselves. A lack of consciousness, this path that is not the path of self-mastery, this path that is based on habit and pattern, in whatever area, in this case I'm using the area of sexuality, but in any area of our lives, if we're getting caught in habitual patterns of drug use, even consuming media, TV, whatever, we're getting caught in patterns that are limiting our life. So that's what I mean by limiting habits and patterns. That's one path. Now, the other path is the path of self-mastery. The path of self-mastery is where you choose consciously to get to know yourself. You get to know who you are. You get to know what those wounds are. You get to know where you want to be going. Often our wounds actually lead us in some ways to where we're going if we address them consciously. You address your purpose and you learn to build skills. So for instance, like in a martial art, you show up a few times a week, once a week, whatever you do, to reinforce skills, to be on a pathway towards something. Nothing in life ever happens unless we're on a pathway towards something, whatever it is we're trying to achieve. And everything in life takes skill. So when we're on a path of self-mastery, we're learning skills in whatever area. And of course, you can only do so much. You can't do everything. So you have to choose what parts of life do you really want to gain skill in. Usually we have to learn skill, I think, around relationships, career and purpose in the world, in our true calling, in sexuality, and in whatever hobbies or whatever activities we want. Maybe there's skill in terms of building things and skill in terms of fixing things. So we have to build skill. That's the path of self-mastery. Now, some of that involves addressing your wounding, to go back to the other side, because if you don't address your wounding, and this is something that I think a lot of men don't get, we have unconscious minds. We have unconscious processes that drive us. And if you don't understand what your unconscious patterns are, they will drive you. Carl Jung said something like, if you don't make the unconscious conscious, it will run your life and you will call it fate. This is a truth. We have an unconscious mind. We have wounding from the past, and we have the ability to suppress and push things away. Those unconscious patterns are still there running our lives. We have to know what they are, and we have to address them. through whatever skills it takes, whatever work it takes to address our wounds and heal. So that's a skill set. Healing is a skill set. And it's not easy, but we have to do it. So healing is a skill set. Learning to communicate in relationships, learning to have relationships is a skill set. Emotions are a skill set. Sexuality is a skill set. Business, your purpose, whatever it is that you're working on, there are skill sets involved there. So the path of self-mastery is something that we all have to be on. And sometimes we forget that that's our responsibility. We have to take life by the horns and learn the skills that it takes to get where we want to go. You can't avoid that. Now, sometimes when you address certain things like wounding and unconscious patterns, it actually makes everything a whole lot easier. So that's part of the self-mastery path, is understanding these general ways that you think and feel and behave that get in the way of the more detailed skill sets you need to learn in your life. So when I'm working with someone, I'm working on some of the more basic patterns they have in their life, how they think, how they feel, how they behave, and helping them to understand then how to apply that to skill sets that are going to get them where they want to go. And what I work a lot with men on is the skill set of sexuality, learning how to understand their own bodies, learning how to last as long as they want to last so that they can create all kinds of experiences and love and beauty with their partners. They need to learn to do that on their own, I believe, because that skill set isn't something that often men have naturally. Some men do. Some men are very naturally skilled lovers, and a lot of men are not. It's a skill set, whether you're just endowed with it or you have to learn it, you can do it. But for men that don't have the skill set, especially if you have old habits and patterns from that other side, where you've developed a porn addiction or you've developed certain habits and ways of thinking about women or love that just don't work, you have to unlearn the old and learn the skill set that works in your sexuality. And there are all kinds of skills that you need to learn. You need to learn to be present. You need to learn how to feel sexual energy. You need to learn how to relax. You need to learn how to breathe. You need to learn how to let your body's natural movements and vocalizations happen. So there's all kinds of things that you can learn there. And I happen to do a lot of work with men on troubleshooting that and helping men get away from those old patterns, out of addictions, out of old habits that get them stuck, and into these new habits to help them build the skills they need to get where they want to go. So there are two main paths. One path is the path of habit and addiction, which we all have the tendency to go into that, to get caught in limited patterns that hold us back. And then there's the path of self-mastery, the path of learning skills to get where you want to go in your life, to build the most gourmet, amazing life you can have, and to be honest with yourself about what skills you need. And in order to do that, you have to look at yourself. You have to address your wounding, your trauma, whatever's there, and take full responsibility for yourself, for your life. Radical self-honesty, radical responsibility. When you do that and you get on this path of self-mastery, there's nothing you can't achieve.